Glad to have you here. I hope it's a good one. I'm not going to try and talk too much, so I hope it's a good one.
He's scheduled for 60 minutes next. He's going on French, British, Italian, Japanese television. People everywhere are starting to listen to him. It's embarrassing.
Cut the music with so much class. 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 Cut the music with so much class.
So damn hot.
Yo, 9 seconds left.
I'm trying to get a Skype phone call with that guy. I've seen that dude before, and I know of the Substack you're talking about.
So damn hot. So damn.
We might hook that up. He might even come on the show. You never know. The tide is starting to turn. Norman might even come on the show. You never know. Why is everything so damn hot?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I don't know why everything's so hot.
Well, what started out as a fishing trip
We'll see.
sure
Maybe
ended in a
maybe it's
nasty
just that
mystery.
one slide that I've got to adjust. Sorry about that.
Fishing. Oh, come on.
Moderna,
Screw.
if you got a link to
Give up.
that
You're not gonna catch
Substack,
anything
drop
in
it
that
in.
bucket of water.
All right, well, we got to talk to Jay Bhattacharya then about that. We got to straighten him out a little bit. I'm excited about that. That's very exciting.
That's one
I
fish
like
story
that
no one
challenge.
will believe.
Thanks for that. I can't post links. How come? That's weird. I think I can post links. I'll figure it out. I can't do it right now while I'm live, but I probably can, but I'm not gonna. But if you can't post links, I don't know if that's your setting or everybody's setting. I'll try and figure it out. There it is. I thought so. I don't have very much so many controls set up. This is Gigo and Biological, a high-resistance, low-noise information brief brought to you by a biologist. It's the 16th of November, 2023. Welcome to the show. Tonight I wanted to watch a discussion Jonathan Engler and Jessica Hockett had with Naomi Wolf. Really could be potentially very interesting depending on what part of this very lively debate within that spectrum of acceptable opinion we're working on, and how much we're really trying to give people a sense of free thinking, or how much free thinking we're really doing. We're going to stop misleading the young. That's the main goal of Gigo and Biological, is ending this misleading of the young by teaching the history, making sure we don't take part in this lie. The simplest step of courage any individual can take is not taking part in the lie. Those aren't my words. Many smarter people than me have already seen this evil coming. Many smarter people than me have known how this has worked in previous iterations. I think the brick wall is visible, and I think we can see it. And I think the biology is the best way to show people more and more of the brick wall without terrifying them about the truth. And the biology shows us that there was no spread in New York City, that infectious clones are the only real threat. Placebo batches were likely distributed in transfection in healthy mammals is dumb. The protocols were murder, gain of function is a mythology. The Scooby-Doo is real. The Scooby-Doo is designed to protect the mystery, to make it seem like you've solved the mystery. That's the best way to brainwash yourself, is to think that you solved the puzzle. and have that answer to the puzzle be the trap itself. And if the players are committed to the lies, then that's the trap. And the lies they are committed to are on the screen right now. These are the lies that everybody is committed to, that there was a novel virus that millions of people died from. Maybe 16 million around the world, but even more were saved. Gain of function is real and likely the source of this pandemic, and even if it wasn't this one, it could be the next one, and a virus will come again. That's the deal. And so Gigo and Biological is all about trying to break that faith and show why that is a whole mythology that has been constructed in order to govern us by it. Thanks for noticing that my voice is still sounding really good. I actually got to tell you, it's getting stronger every day. I'm not yelling in the gym yet, but I could. And I don't know what to say other than it's getting stronger. I haven't had pain the whole time it's been recovering, but there has been different levels of complete, and I think it's getting really close to complete. I mean, I still have this thing that I've always had where sometimes it just doesn't start, and the voice just doesn't come out when I want it to. But I've had that problem as far as I can remember. So it's just kind of like, I don't know if the vocal cords are big and sometimes they don't get started or whatever. But that's always been an issue. But the way that they're working right now, I'm just knock on wood. I hope somehow or another my body's healed itself. We'll see. So don't take the bait on TV and social media, and make sure that you understand again that what's perceived to be true is most important, and that's what a lot of these people have always been about. Not really so much about dissidence as they are about controlling the narrative and making sure that what's perceived to be true is that worst case scenario. What's perceived to be true is maybe uncertainty. And even though the possibility space is being controlled, it's the uncertainty within that possibility space that keeps everybody on shaky ground, keeps everybody guessing. And then as we went through this mystery-solving exercise with Rand Paul and Tony Fauci arguing and emails being redacted, we have been rushed right past the conclusion that we should have come to, which is that intramuscular injection of any combination of substances with the intent of augmenting the immune system is dumb, and specifically transfection in healthy humans is criminally negligent. Oh yeah, I split this up into two why can't I talk while I'm doing this? I split this up into two slideshows because I guess it's starting to take up too much memory with some of the background movies from Bleeple that I'm using. I don't know if you noticed that or not. Those slides are from Bleeple, some of those videos. Let me switch over here. So we have been telling this story of a Scooby-Doo, and that one needs to go off for now. Okay, I apologize. I'm a little behind here with my tech. I don't have anybody in the background. Everybody once in a while, you send an email, says, tell your staff or tell your switcher or whatever. I don't have that. It's all buttons in front of me. We've been trying to explain to our family and friends and to the new viewers that absolutely every once in a while join us right now. I would guess that all 48 viewers are old friends and family. And so thanks very much for being here every night and making this not seem like I'm shouting into nowhere. The Scooby-Doo is my best way of explaining how we've been fooled. We have been fooled into believing we are akin to a group of teenagers that has been following clues and solving a puzzle where at the end we have to take the mask off of the bad guys and find out who the monsters are. And we feel like that as a society that we've unmasked Tony Fauci and EcoHealth Alliance and the Wuhan laboratory as collaborators in this very hubristic gain of function research, which is the most likely source of this pandemic. Even if they got it out of a bat cave, they tweaked it, they goofed around with it. They were making chimeric viruses. And it's this argument of it, the faux cover-up of it, the faux censorship of it, that has resulted in the average mouth-breathing, skilled TV watcher to feel as though they have successfully participated or followed along with a real-time 3-year mystery solving exercise. And that 3-year mystery solving exercise is the pandemic. What is going on with my tech here? Let's go. And so last night we watched a video of Rand Paul basically explaining where we are, and they have us right where they want us with this Scooby-Doo, believing that there was a novel virus for sure that killed 1 million people in America and 16 million people around the world is exactly what Rand Paul said not 3 days ago on an ABC News program. 16 million people died, and even more were saved by a combination of not-so-perfect choices and the spectacularly fast rollout of an almost completely perfect mRNA product. But unfortunately, what has been revealed by this 3-year pandemic is that gain of function is very real. Not only that, but in this interview, it is none other than Kevin Esvelt, the perfecter of the gene drive, the perfecter of directed evolution, saying that gain of function in viruses is the premier biological threat that could threaten 50 billion people in the universe. So the viruses will definitely come again. And this story, this illusion of consensus across and around the globe, across the spectrum of debate, this illusion of consensus that this is more or less what had to have happened, is how they want to trap our children. And it is a faith based on nothing but mythology and wisps of biology, concepts that are too grand and too well defined to be applied to. I hear a little tiny bit of sound. Maybe that thing is just bleeding through. Are too grand and too defined to apply to something as constricted and well understood in limitations as an RNA or DNA virus. And so the idea is to scare you into believing that an RNA molecule coated in a protein lipoprotein coat is capable of circulating around the globe perpetually, making copies of itself, remember. It started out as a very small quantity and a few people unlucky at the market. And it has expanded itself. An RNA molecule coated in lipoprotein has expanded itself to the point where, oh, that's what that is. That's 4 over here. That one. Has expanded itself into millions of people, enough to kill 16 million people. That's the story. I'm sorry I'm tone is so broken. This is really just some new buttons have changed. It's not really working here. Can I test this one? Is that working? I mean, this is the whole idea of the thing. It's a little bit delayed. But this is really the joke that they've played on us. This 3 years of illusion of consensus where they pretend to be revealing, they pretend to be coming out, they pretend to say, hey, this is my technology. They pretend to say, hey, I heard a whole bunch of stories about people who got killed by the vaccine. Maybe it's not so good after all. Did you take it? Yeah, I took it. Did he take it? Yeah, he took it. No, I didn't take it. I'm taking ivermectin. And this story that was woven over these last 3 years has been so intricately designed to preserve the novel virus that killed millions of people, from which millions more were saved, and gain of function is likely source, and the virus will come again. And so I've been trying to make this diagram of people just to give you an idea of how we are trapped by this illusion of consensus, because no matter where we turn, we find somebody with a slightly different story and a slightly different, shtick. But in the end, all of these people's shtick do not question the premises of a novel virus, millions of people being killed by it, millions more being saved from it, gain of function being a real thing, and a virus likely to come again. None of these people will question it except for people like Nick Hudson and Denny Rancor, Jessica Hockett. I mean, I have Peter McCullough there because he's questioning the childhood vaccine schedule, but Peter McCullough actually doesn't question this part of the faith yet at all. Certainly doesn't question gain of function, certainly doesn't question that millions died. And so we still have a lot of work to do. This diagram is still far from complete. It's kind of optimistic in a way. And so I really need you to think of the Scooby-Doo as part of this thing that kept us focused, cognitively focused on this imaginary journey. In this case, portrayed as some kind of weird subway tunnel with neon lights. And so we were focused on this solving this mystery, figuring out what was going on, and all these different accounts and stories all lined up. Accounts from the United States, accounts from Australia, accounts from people who worked for EcoHealth Alliance, accounts for people who invented the mRNA, accounts from people who worked in government and argued with people in government. And soon we're going to have accounts from people who are running for president. I already have it. That's right. I already have it. All the stuff that I wanted to get in the book is in the book. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. There's going to be some serious fireworks coming in the coming weeks. But in this tunnel, we still find ourselves. In this tunnel, certainly our family and friends are in this tunnel. Certainly all the people that are skillfully watching television, no matter what TV channel they choose, they are in this tunnel, still believing that Batcave viruses have pandemic potential, still believing that that pandemic potential can be accessed through cell culture or through animal passage, and still believing that you can stitch these things together. And if you stitch the wrong parts together, away it'll go. Around the world. You shouldn't have spilled that paint outside your door. Holy cow. That's terrible. Those squirrels are going to track that paint all over the world. It's never going to stop. And this illusion of this potential worst case scenario being 5 billion people dead was just recently reiterated by Rand Paul, citing Kevin Esvelt, the perfecter of the gene drive and perfected directed evolution in proteins. We are talking about some serious obfuscation and misdirection of what the real biological dangers are, what the real technologies we need to be afraid of are. It's not gain of function in viruses, and it's not gain of function in coronaviruses. It is infectious clones produced in quantity in RNA viruses, that's for sure. And it is directed evolution in proteins for toxins, for immunogens, and enzymes, and it is gene drives. Why are they doing this? Because they plan to coerce a surrender of individual sovereignty and global fundamental inversion from human rights to freedom to fascism. That's why. And so I'm not really sure what this illusion of what role this illusion of consensus is supposed to play, other than to make sure that we ask the wrong questions. And you can ask any questions you want to ask. That's why it feels a little bit less like a storyline in a tunnel and more like a cube or a trap now that we're looking out of. It's kind of transparent. And all these things are going on the outside, and all these people will tell us what we see. But we're not actually seeing anything anymore. We're seeing what the TV wants us to see, what social media wants us to see, and we have no way of verifying that what we think we are seeing is true. And these people can go all around the world on podcasts all around the world and create the illusion of consensus that traps us in this very vivid debate and argument but it's actually just a cube that expands and contracts, and we can't escape from it anymore. They have us now. They have us in this trap already where our children believe that pandemic potential exists in bat caves. Pandemic potential is being released on the world because of our ever increasing encroachment on nature, our overpopulation, and climate change. So make no mistake about it, we are already almost trapped in this cognitive prison that circumvents language and culture and traps us all in this narrative of pandemic viruses. And so that's why I think it's really important to start to figure out who we can trust and then to elevate their discourse so that no matter what the censorship is, we have this network of real people amplifying real people. And somehow we've got to get this word out before digital ID is required on the internet, before digital ID becomes adopted for air travel, which is probably inevitable at this stage. Unfortunately, as I said last night, you already have the software in your passport if you have one. It just doesn't have the data on it yet. If you have a real ID, driver's license in the United States, you already have the chip. You just don't have it loaded yet. So let's watch Jessica and Jonathan on this podcast and see what they have to say. I think it should be a good one.
Hey everyone, welcome. It's Dr. Naomi Wolf, and I'm honored to be joined today by Jessica Hockett and Jonathan Engler of the distinguished group Pandata. Welcome, Ms. Hockett and Mr. Engler.
Hi.
Yeah, so excited to have you. So we've got some bios. Mr. Engler started life as a medical doctor. I'm sorry, I should have said Dr. Engler, before moving into the pharmaceutical industry, where he gained experience in designing, running, and reporting clinical trials to regulatory standards. After a few years, he set up a business using automation to streamline clinical trials, and this was sold to a U.S. corporation a decade later. He retrained as a lawyer because why not make your Jewish mother incredibly happy? Right? Practiced for a short period before re-entering the healthcare business world, and he is the co-chair with Claire Craig, whom I adore, by the way. I've never met her, but I've admired her forever, of the UK-based Heart Group, which opposes UK government policies of the last few years. He is also on the executive committee of the international research group Panda, where he works closely with Jessica. Now, Jessica Hockett lives in the Chicago area and worked in the K-12 education sector for more than 20 years, first as a teacher and then as a consultant to schools and agencies and policy organizations. She's published many publications, including numerous articles and 3 books. Since 2020, she has used her research skills to push against government mandates, censorship, and false claims about COVID-19. She publishes her investigative work on New York City's mass fatality event on Twitter at Wood_House76 and her Substack, woodhouse76.com, and is proud to be associated with the international group Panda, through which she collaborates with Jonathan Engler and others. And so such distinguished guests for today. Again, welcome. The reason that we're speaking with Dr. Engler and Ms. Hockett today is that Pandata, their group, reached out to let us know that they had reviewed the 2020 New York City fatality statistics, and they had some questions, serious questions. So over to you. Please tell us what you found in your own research. And again, I just want to underscore, this is their independent research. Daily Cloud has not evaluated it. Our group has not evaluated it. It's.
So I'll just stop it right here and see if I can orchestrate this a little bit here. That should work. So first of all, let's just outline what they said. Jonathan Engler is co-chair of the Heart Group, which is actually out of the UK. And he's also part of the board of Panda. Panda is based in South Africa, and it's actually Nick Hudson's group, right? Sorry for the messy pencil. I don't know why I'm using pencil tonight. And Jessica Hockett used to work in Chicago. I think she worked for Chicago Public Schools. She's also been associated with the Hoover Institute, which is at Stanford. You might know that from also, that's where people like Thomas Sowell are appointed. And she came into Panda actually maybe a year after I had first presented to Panda. I think I had presented to Panda only twice have I presented to Panda, maybe 3 times, twice for sure. And both of those times were before Jessica presented there. And since Jessica came to Panda, they really have been working very hard to promote her ideas about New York City, and I think they've been very successful at it. And I do want to give at least a shout out to Jessica and Jonathan right away at the start. They have been encouraging me to write a Substackish article explaining my ideas about clones and the PCR and just try to iron out some of the biology that I've been teaching. And while I've had other people also encourage me to do that, for me, unlike people like Matt Crawford or even Robert Malone or these other people that can put out, 20 or 30 or 40 pages of Substack every day, and 2 or 3 articles sometimes every day. That's not me. That's not how I write. It's sometimes how I talk. And so it's possible that at some point I will crack the code on how to, let's say, turn on a stream and record and then translate that into an article or to a transcript later that is useful to edit. And so for now, just say it's on the to-do list. And now that, a book plug again, now that this book is going to be coming out in about 3 weeks, it's actually a very important time for me to have that article ready to go so that all of the biology that's, encoded in this book with my name next to it can be adequately explained, and questions can be answered as the book circulates. It's pretty exciting, ladies and gentlemen. It is actually going to happen. I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to be able to get somewhere, and I'm cautiously optimistic that when we do get somewhere, Jonathan Engler, Jessica Hockett, and Nick Hudson, and a few other people are going to be strategically ready to make sure that these ideas are ready to springboard into what might become common knowledge, which is really what we need to happen. In much the same way that people have come to realize that, wow, I think it might be a lab leak. We have to make people continue down this progression to realize that, wow, I may have been purposefully fooled into believing that I was figuring out that it was a lab leak so that I would make sure that my children would believe in these mythologies for their lives. And that's pretty scary. But on the other hand, it's pretty exciting. And you can have a whole boatload of hope once you start to realize that, wait, does that mean that we stopped it? Like once you realize that, oh, wait, if we just don't believe, then it's all gone? Yes. Then suddenly it can become a very uplifting moment, especially for some of these people who have felt oppressively trapped by this for 3 years, where the rest of us have at least been pushing back against it. I don't think you can underestimate how exciting of a moment this is, potentially, as this book comes out and as these ideas come out in real, tangible form in a way that we can use as a springboard to get more detailed explanations about these ideas out there, to get more attention to some extremely well done lectures that you can bet your donuts I'm preparing, so that when the time comes and when the viewers come in the coming weeks, that we are ready to teach the basic biology of this Scooby-Doo once and for all while everybody is watching, and have a published transcript to go along with it, some graphics, some cards, some slides. You don't think I'm getting ready for that? You got another thing coming, ladies and gentlemen. So let's have some fun. Let's listen to our allies, Jonathan Engler and Jessica Hockett, talk with Naomi Wolf about the idea of whether or not there was a real pandemic or something that they kind of orchestrated and called something that it wasn't. Exciting.
It's their finding. So over to you to tell us what you found.
Yeah, so I mean, my first suspicions about the story that we were being told arose in a few years ago, actually, 2020, 2021, when it looked like basically the COVID deaths which were claimed shot up in a peak simultaneously across the whole United Kingdom at the same time, with a few days in between, but basically simultaneously.
Something in, Dr. Engler, around what month was that?
That's March 2020. Yeah.
Yep.
And I thought that's a slightly strange thing for a spreading pathogen to do. And of course, the alternative theory to that, which I developed in Panda with a genius evolutionary biologist who was in Panda there, was maybe it wasn't actually a spreading virus. Maybe it was the response to the idea that there might be a spreading virus. In other words, the dystopian.
Now, I really like Jonathan Engler, but I think it's a little bit. I'm a little disappointed with this kind of explanation. I have a hard time believing that there were very many people in March of 2020 who were already saying, "Wow, that's strange. This peak is strange." That's a pretty bold claim. You can look back at March 2020 from a later time and say, "Wow, that peak looks strange." But you can't look at that peak in March 20 and know that it's strange, unless you were in the hospitals and you knew what people were doing in there. And the idea that he came up with this idea with one other evolutionary biologist in Panda is also a bit of a stretch, because I don't know. I wish that people would be more humble and not say that I right away all the time, when so many people suspected this, so many people knew something was wrong, and so many people brought confirmation in some way or another that allowed all of us to slowly and surely see. None of us could have done this by ourselves if we were the only people we ever met who actually understood that something was going wrong. If I never met anyone else who acknowledged that there's more light over there than there is over here, isn't there? Then we would have all gone crazy. And it frustrates me very much, the same way it frustrates me when people say, "Yeah, but we didn't know what was going on. We weren't sure. We were all really afraid. We just did the best we could." It's so frustrating that people don't want to admit that they had no frickin' clue in March 2020. It's so frickin' annoying. Darn it.
Healthcare response and how it affected the particularly elderly people at the time. And sort of fast forward to 2022, when we discovered that we could download some information from fine-grained information from.
So from March 2020 to somewhere in 2022, you had nothing. Nothing happened. You didn't talk to anybody. Nobody taught you anything about immunology. Nobody taught you anything about viruses. Nobody gave you any confidence about your theory based on the fact that virology as a whole was a little weird. You didn't get any courage or excitement from anybody else's ideas for 2 years until you got to download the data you always knew you needed. Ah, darn it, Jonathan. Come on. There's just no reason for this level of arrogance. It's frustrating. I'm going to play it again, and I'm not going to interrupt him this time because I really want you to hear it. Think about all the people who burnt their careers during 2020, 21, and 22 trying to get some information out there to say, "Hey, something's wrong here." How many doctors spoke up? Come on, man. This is I get frustrated with this kind
Engler
of thing.
and others. And so such distinguished, there is questions.
Being told arose.
It's their finding. So over to you to tell us what you found.
Yeah, so I mean, my first suspicions about the story that we were being told arose in a few years ago, actually, 2020, 2021, when it looked like...
See, 2020, 2021, that's pretty aspecific. If you weren't awake until 2021, then you missed the whole first year. I mean, there's something fishy about this right away. Darn it. What is this?
Basically, the COVID deaths, which were claimed, shot up in a peak simultaneously across the whole United Kingdom at the same time, with a few days in between, but basically simultaneously.
Jumping in, Dr. Engler, around what month was that?
That's March 2020. Yeah.
Yep.
And I thought that's a slightly strange thing for a spreading pathogen to do. And of course, the alternative theory to that, which I developed in Panda with a very a genius evolutionary biologist who was in Panda there, was maybe it wasn't actually a spreading virus. Maybe it was the response to the idea that there might be a spreading virus. In other words, the dystopian healthcare response and how it affected the particularly elderly people at the time. And sort of fast forward to 2022, when we discovered that we could download some information from fine-grained information from Northern Italy, basically daily death information for Northern Italy.
What was the source of this data?
This was the Italian Statistics Institute. So the official government statistics institute in Italy actually publishes a very fine-grained deaths data for going right down into relatively small towns and villages in Northern Italy. And so we actually analyzed that data, trying to find the evidence of spread. The whole critical part of the narrative is that something spread.
Right.
So if something spreads, you should see evidence of it mathematically, because what you get is you get clusterings, and then you get things taking off in a small little fire somewhere. Imagine it's a forest fire, and then that dies out and another one starts off somewhere else. What you wouldn't expect to see would be the simultaneous destruction of the whole forest.
Wow.
At the same time. And that's really, that's a powerful analogy. And of course,
so can we just jump in there? I know you want to set the stage and I appreciate it, but that's really a thought worth processing. You're saying, and do epidemiologists agree with you that the normal way a pathogen spreads is here and then here and then here, rather than everywhere all at once?
Well, that is the narrative as claimed, that it spread. That was the whole basis upon lockdowns, restrictions of movement. So
I'm asking kind of a different question, and I really want to get this right, so please bear with me.
Yeah.
And again,
See, now what I have a problem with here, and like I said, Jonathan and I have been in contact for a long time through Panda, and Jessica has been on my show, and I consider Jessica a friend in the sense of we've had a lot of private messaging and a lot of, she's promoted a lot of my tweets and my work and given me a lot of compliments and been pretty helpful. Definitely hasn't asked me to or told me to do anything or not say anything. And other people are not as supportive. And I find it disappointing that Jonathan Engler is saying that he and one other person in Panda came up with an idea in 2020 about, patterns of not spreading in the UK. And he was already scratching his head about that for 2 years, and then eventually got a hold of the data in Italy and then looked for spread. The problem I have with this story, I got to be really honest with you, the problem that I have with this story is that it de-accentuates the role of protocols. And it's like this. So when are we going to get to saying that what we did was we killed people? And that idea isn't his. That idea can't be his, because we know that so many other people were saying this from the very beginning. So many people that spoke at Panda over those 2 years, including Denny Rancourt. Both of his big first publications came out in those years before they ever had the Italian data. And so they already had confirmation that this was going on. I already had given 2 presentations in front of Panda in 2022. Maybe one of them was in 2021, where I was basically saying that there is no real evidence of spread per se, because that can't really happen. And it's, the fact of the matter is that it's just, it also kind of does a little bit of a disservice for what Panda was. That Panda was really this place where people could come and present their ideas, and people listened and had a critical discussion. And once you presented, you could join every week, and it became this really strong place where these ideas could grow and be hammered out. And so it really does a disservice to the whole panda organization in a way to say that I came up with I noticed something funny in the UK, and then me and another guy in Panda, we came up with this idea, and then we got this data eventually, and then we tested our idea. It's so, I don't know. Why are we doing this? You don't have to give a shout out to everybody, but why not just at least say that Panda was a great place for these ideas to blossom and fruit than just say that, I had this idea since March 2020. Well, what's Jessica doing on the show then? What do you need her for? She finally found what you always knew was going to be found in New York anyway. I mean, I don't know why I'm angry about this, but I just don't like it because everybody's doing this. Brett Weinstein is doing this. If they shut me up, boy, it would be completely different. It'd be the old global slave trade by now. Lucky humanity had me. I'll admit it, I'm pretty frustrated because a lot of these people are doing just fine. What did he say? He was a doctor and a lawyer and all this other stuff, so I'm sure he didn't lose his job. And if he did, well, I'm sorry. I don't know. People whining about what they sacrificed, people whining about what they lost. This is a game for all the marbles. This is for our children's children. This is for our children being slaves or not. This is about subcutaneous chipping of children. And people are still playing the, whose idea was this game and who gets credit for this. Why are we playing this game like this? It's just annoying.
I'm not a medical doctor, so my frame of reference is 400 years of, English and American memoirs and novels and so on. And what you're saying really resonates with like accounts of the bubonic plague, right? It wasn't everywhere all at once. It was in this town, and then it was in that town, and then it was, coming in the harbor. Are you saying that epidemiologists agree with you that pathogens do not spread everywhere all at once? They spread here in a cluster, and then to there in a cluster, and to there in a cluster. Is that what you're saying?
That's what they should do. But of course, what they've been trying to do with the data we've been presenting is remake all their assumptions so that their perception of what happened, which was that a novel deadly virus spread from Wuhan across the world, so that fits that. But the more assumptions they have to change to make that model fit, the less credible it basically looks.
Sorry, I just want to dig in here because what you're saying is kind of incredible. So you're saying that epidemiologists in the past agreed that pathogens spread the way you just described, from this place to this place to this place in clusters, but that currently epidemiologists, and I'm assuming you mean kind of institutional epidemiologists as opposed to our dissident friends who are epidemiologists, are now remaking their assumptions about how pathogens spread in order to align the expectations with the COVID narrative that everything spread all at once. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So, for example, they might have thought a few years ago it's a classical spread of a pathogen from person to person. If you isolate somebody, it will reduce its spread, and we can model this using complex modeling and so on. Now they're having to introduce the idea of triggers that they don't really understand to explain why did it take off simultaneously in these different areas? It must be a trigger that we don't understand. Now, we would say that the trigger is not a virus. The trigger is the spread of fear, panic, and dystopia.
Wow.
But I should point out that there is somewhat of an omerta over the whole story about what happened in 2020. Is even people who have worked out that the whole vaccine program is of dubious efficacy, safety, and justification, are unwilling to look deeply into what actually happened in spring 2020.
Right.
So we're out on a limb, both within the skeptical and the non-skeptical community.
Well, let's bracket that, okay, and move right into what do you say you found? I get your theory that the mass deaths may not have been a virus, in this case behaving kind of anomalously and being everywhere all at once and killing people everywhere all at once. And you're right, moving country by country, right? That's not, I've studied the history of plagues, back to Justinian, and it wasn't like that. It was this court, this town, right? It wasn't, now it's the Roman Empire, right? Now it's stopped at this border. Now it's leapt over to,
It's unfortunate that they're biologically equating the plague with potential viral spread. I think there's good reason to believe that, irrespective of what cartoon model is actually right, there's a different cartoon model for the plague and for a virus. Regardless of what the real biology is, it's a different.
Well,
All right. I mean,
yeah, that is the really very unusual thing about this virus is that it seems to know where all the national boundaries are.
right.
Well,
Right. Exactly.
I'm sorry, I'm not buying that. But anyway, I'm going to hand over to Jessica in a minute, but just as a sort of segue into that, just to point out that our Italy analysis, which is one of Panda's most commented on papers, actually, is the paper that I wrote in, I think, either September or October last year, which raised the question of whether there was actually evidence of spread, or rather the simultaneous imposition of a set of conditions on the population.
Right.
There was only so far we could go in terms of the Italy analysis, mainly for language reasons. It's quite difficult as an outsider to dig into what data you need, where you might get it, make FOI requests, FOIA as you call them, FOIA requests, and so on. This is where I'm going to hand over to Jessica, because what we've basically done is we've repeated that analysis, or part of that analysis, for New York City.
Okay, just jumping in, just wanting to just make sure I understand everything you're saying. Your thesis is that it may not be COVID that killed all those people simultaneously all at once in Italy, and now you're about to explain in New York City. It might have been the lockdown conditions, meaning isolation, these horrible protocols in hospitals, fear, multi-generational households crowded together. Do I have that correct?
You do, yeah. But there's an additional twist in the New York situation, which may also pertain to the Northern Italy situation, but we don't have enough information to interrogate it properly. And the additional twist is that we are putting the authorities to proof, to show us that the people actually died, the numbers being claimed actually died.
I love that, and we'll get to that. I just need to ask one follow-up question. Forgive me for stopping you so often. I just think it's very important, and I want to make, if you're right, it's very important, and I want to make sure everyone watching fully understands what you're saying. How could, if you're right, hypothetically, that it was the conditions of lockdown rather than the virus that suddenly killed all these people in Italy, and now we're going to talk about New York City in March of 2020. How could that happen so fast? Because lockdowns only started in New York on March 8th of 2020.
Well, I mean, a lot of the Jessica will expand on this, but there are various different mechanisms. I mean, we've got two scenarios. One is that people died quickly.
It's a suggestion that she's making, the conditions of the lockdown. It's not the conditions of the lockdown. It's specifically the conditions in the hospital, the financial incentive and administrative control of how to treat the novel virus. And so it's very specifically this faith in a novel virus that could be detected by a non-specific PCR test, and a list of bad ideas that go along with those things. And so we need to be very specific and very precise, and we're not being very specific and being precise right now. So I hope they get there soon.
And that is explainable in some places, although maybe not to the total extent of the number of deaths claimed, but that is explainable by some of the policies implemented. I mean, first of all, elderly.
What do you mean? Lockdowns are not going to kill people in 3 weeks. Remdesivir and ventilators could kill
Correct. People. So I was going to come on to say there are a variety of things that could well have claimed people's lives prematurely. I mean, you've got to remember that within any health, with any system where, particularly when you have elderly people who are basically being maintained by quite a complex social care and healthcare environment, it doesn't take much to tip those people over the edge, and you then generate a peak of deaths. I mean, we see it with heat waves.
Right.
You see it with heat waves. So people are, if you view the whole social care apparatus around elderly people, including their relatives, if you view that as their life support system, disrupt that, people will die.
Oh my gosh. And so immediately what I'm thinking about, being a New Yorker, is that our governor, I believe in March and April, moved people with COVID infections into nursing care homes, which we call elder care homes, which is totally unheard of. And then there was a rash of deaths in nursing care homes.
Yeah. There she made a mistake. She said people were moved into nursing homes with COVID infections. Most likely they were moved into nursing homes already with pneumonia, with bacterial pneumonia. And they weren't given antibiotics. And so it appears as though Naomi is still very much fighting for the faith that there was a novel virus that killed millions of people, or at least was around when millions of people died. It was in the room. I mean, I guess we can agree that the virus didn't actually kill the old lady, but the virus was definitely here, right? And so I think you can see where GigaOhm Biological's work is still far from done. And in fact, it may be that Jessica and Jonathan and the rest of this Panda team, or whatever team this is, with Nick Hudson and Martin Neal, that maybe they're just missing this biology that we've been working on for the last 3 years, and our contribution, that's in the book. It's in the book. I'm going to keep showing it. It's one of the happiest days of my recent years here, to have this book out and then to open to the pages and realize that the stuff that I really wanted to get in there all made it in. And the best part is that on the back, Robert Malone says this is an awesome book. So Robert Malone actually endorsed me, which is pretty dope. Like, he doesn't know who I am, but he says that the book's pretty cool and it's historic documents. So this biology is pretty important. That's quite a review, you know what I mean? So anyway, let's keep listening. I like this interview. I'm glad I'm getting fired up about it. I'm glad I got fired up about it in the beginning. And Jonathan Engler, if you saw it, then good. You know how fired up I am, but I'm sure you're going to pull it out. And I'm just have overreacted. So let's go.
So your hypothesis is that, and makes human sense, it makes intuitive sense, that very elderly people are kept alive by networks of people,
Yep.
that making sure they're being looked after, making sure they're getting their medication, keeping their spirits up. And if you
hydrating them,
if you lock very elderly people away in isolation, you don't even need to ventilate or remdesivir them necessarily for a lot of them to simply give up.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. And I will just chime in with a data point that I'm sure you've taken into account, that one of our colleagues analyzed the deaths data for Massachusetts and found that the average COVID death was 2 years older than the average death. So they're counting people who are already, as dying from COVID, who are already at the end of their lifespans. Whereas I take your point, they may be hanging on by a thread. The thread will be extended if people love them and take care of them and come see them and keep them.
And so this is, of course, a very important time to bring in this idea that the illusion of consensus is about a novel virus, and that this effect that we see here, that I'm circling with my arrow, this effect could only be a novel virus killing millions of people. And it can't possibly be the combination of protocols, like the do not resuscitate orders and the ventilators and the lack of antibiotics and the poor use of steroids and remdesivir and opioid deaths and death certificate fraud. It can't be any of that stuff. It's just a novel virus, COVID. And so we've got to roll back this idea by accurately accounting for what actually did take people out. And it does feel as though this is happening in this podcast. And I hope that they can convert Naomi fully. It'll be very interesting.
And it may be cut together if you remove their support system.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, have a saying that everything was COVID, and COVID was everything, in the sense that it's the everyman's virus, COVID. So it's both sneaky and stealthy, but then it explodes like a bomb. It apparently is completely unique, but then it causes every single symptom anybody can ever think of.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Sorry.
It's completely mad.
That is okay. Well, I'm getting a clearer picture now. Thank you so much. Ms. Hockett, please pick up and tell us what you found specifically about when you looked at New York City.
Sure. So the New York City's spring 2020 mass casualty event, even though I live in Chicago, I don't live in New York, has troubled me deeply since 2021, for sure. The data from New York and the casualties sustained in New York in 11 weeks, 27,000 extra people died, the equivalent mortality-wise of about 10 9/11 events, is many, many magnitudes higher.
According to whom? What were these claims from?
According to data, the Federal Mortality Database, CDC Wonder, and according to data that I obtained directly from the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, their 2020 vital statistics report. I've obtained a lot of data from them and other New York City agencies, especially on a daily basis. But yeah, about 27,000 extra deaths in 11 weeks. Huge mortality event. We do not have the names of the dead. In fact, journalistic efforts have only uncovered about deaths in the report. I've obtained a lot of data from them and other New York City agencies, especially on a daily basis. But yeah, about 27,000 extra deaths in 11 weeks. Huge mortality event. We do not have the names of the dead. In fact, journalistic efforts have only uncovered about 2,500 or so names from that event. There are no death certificates. There's no way in New York State to get death certificates so that we can simply verify that this event occurred. And I want to be clear about that too. About my contention or my suspicion is that we have a major fraud event at work with New York City, and not just in terms of cause of death. Was this a COVID death? Was this not a COVID death? But insofar as what the city and the federal government are claiming about the number of people who actually died each day on the ground in real time in the settings that they are claimed to have occurred. That is my contention. I think they're wrong.
All right. Wow. Strong words. So let me again try to understand exactly what you're saying. You looked at data for New York City from two government sources. One was federal, a CDC managed database, and one was municipal, a New York City health and mental health database.
Sure. So that's for the all cause mortality. But then we have multiple. What I've been doing, especially over the past year and a half or so in earnest, is gathering multiple and different kinds of data, not just death data, but ambulance dispatch data, hospital occupancy data, emergency room data, 911 call data, to really try to understand what the heck happened here. Why doesn't anybody want to talk about it? And do all these data points fit together.
line. Right.
With New York, we have this massive spike that happened nowhere else in magnitude or speed.
Jumping in. When you say this massive spike, you're talking about the 27,000 extra deaths higher than expected in what time period?
In the time period of mid-March 2020 to the end of May 2020, most of that mortality occurred within about 4 to 5 weeks, though.
Okay.
I use that 11-week period as the spring 2020 event.
Okay, so jumping in, do the municipal data about these 27,000 purported extra deaths match the CDC data about the purported?
Not exactly. It's a little complicated to explain, but there are discrepancies. I've written about them on my Substack on the order of maybe 1,000 or so deaths. So it's not it's a significant number, but it's not an explanation for the 27,000.
Not that important. All right, moving on. You're saying that you're trying to identify these individuals by death certificate. Is that correct?
Well, no, I'm saying these individuals have not been identified.
Who hasn't identified them?
Nobody has identified them. We don't.
Isn't that due to medical privacy laws and HIPAA? Like
not necessarily. A vital record is different from a medical record. In many states, you can obtain death certificates via FOIA, even with names on them. That's not the case with the names in every state, but with some people like Minnesota, I think somebody obtained every death certificate. Just the basics, right? So and so died on this day. These are the attributed causes, and this is where they died. You can't even get that in New York City. But when it comes to
but jumping in, is this an anomaly? Would you have been in the past able?
Let me make a connection with you. This is the largest mass casualty event in New York City ever, and I would say almost in any city in U.S. history ever. And there is no proof of these deaths. We have
I've got to jump in. I'm sorry. I have to ask. I'm asking if that's an anomaly, meaning if you were to FOIA the 3,000 people who were said to have died in the Twin Towers on 9/11, would Jessica Hockett have been able to FOIA proof of all those individuals' deaths?
Not so for 9/11, they released the names.
But no one verified. I mean, no one verified them, to my knowledge, the way you are wanting. I'm asking if
we need either names. We need either names of all these people who are alleged to have died during this event, and/or death certificates, preferably both.
So I've looked at the databases for these purported deaths from my book, The Bodies of Others. I saw what you saw, which is totally unverifiable because they are strings of numbers rather than any individual names. What I'm saying is that a departure? Isn't that standard practice? And I run a tech company, so I'm asking this kind of from a nerdy point of view. For data sets where you have to conceal people's identity for privacy reasons, you would, as a coder, assign them a number. So I'm asking you.
No, I mean, in Illinois, I could get every death certificate if I submitted a FOIA. So I'm saying it varies from state to state.
All right.
And in New York State, current law does not permit me to get death certificates in the same way that John Bodwin did for Massachusetts. But I think more broadly, and this is really important, is that the government should not be able to claim that an event occurred without, especially one of this magnitude, especially one that was used to scare the world, lock up children, and hurt people, force them to take a vaccine, and not have to prove the event. It's true with 9/11 that the death certificates, to my knowledge, have not been attempted to be obtained, but we have a list of names at the very least.
All right. So now I understand. So you are balked by the fact that these data sets, which is indeed frustrating, are strings of numbers rather than names. And you don't know if these are real people. You're saying that this death pattern departs from what you'd expect to see. I understand that due to privacy laws in New York State, they don't have to release the names of these individuals to you, right? Even with FOIA. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is, therefore, this is the point you've reached where you're saying this is an anomaly. We can't confirm these people. Now we're asking New York City authorities to verify that these people are real people who actually died. Is that correct?
Sure. Yeah, that's a big piece of it. And the different data sets and data points don't fit together. One example is that, New York City hospitals claimed, and the media claimed, that New York City hospitals were overrun with patients. The data are clear. They were not overrun with patients. ED visits to the emergency department plummeted 60%. And at the same time, we have an extra 20,000, or we had not extra 20,000, excuse me, extra maybe 16 or 17,000. I'm pulling the number from my head, of people who died during that period in New York City hospitals. To put it differently, New York City data shows an occupancy. So that means, how many patients were in beds. They show a peak occupancy in that period of 20,000 inpatients. Their death data shows about 20,000 inpatient died.
Wow.
So it would be the biggest mass casualty event by far in a hospital system anywhere. Imagine, just picture that.
Yeah. No, I understand.
Single bed.
By the way, so just to correct something that you said, if you don't mind, Naomi, you gave the impression that we had access to kind of anonymized roll calls of the people who died. We don't even have that.
Okay.
So it's not like you said strings of numbers replacing names. We don't have even that. All we have are totals on spreadsheet. Yeah.
Well, that's not okay.
No, it's not okay.
The New York Times has more than that, right? I mean, at a state level, they have data sets where each individual purportedly has a line. So that's really a smoking gun there, because you really can't check line by line, right? You can't check that this individual who is said to have died in Queens on March 22nd matches a death in Queens, right?
Right.
So interesting. So is that the case for both sources of data, that both the CDC and the municipal authorities are just giving totals and not individualized spreadsheets? Is that correct?
Yeah. By individualized spreadsheets, you mean like line by line death?
Right.
Right. I mean, CDC Wonder, you cannot search individual. CDC Wonder is the federal database. It's like where all the death certificates go, or the data from them, and you can't search necessarily individual deaths, right? To see what a death certificate says. And to be clear, we're not talking about releasing autopsies for everybody who had an autopsy.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm just asking if every individual death has a line on a spreadsheet and what you're getting. It seems like no.
Right. Yeah. We do not have that for New York State or New York City, and it's not obtainable under state law.
All right. So thank you for explaining. So, devil's advocate, people I knew who worked in pharmacies in high death areas said that a lot of people were being found dead at home and never made it to the hospital. Could that help explain the anomalies that you're seeing?
Yeah, but I'm going to be writing about that further in the coming weeks. But really high percentage, a really high increase in deaths occurring at home very quickly in New York City. And what I found is that people did call 911. 911 calls they spiked crazy and immediately with the 15 days to slow the spread. Ambulance dispatch data, we have some anomalies in that data that another associate and I are exploring. We're getting a lot of runaround from the Fire Department of New York on the anomalies that we see. But ambulances were dispatched, but dispatches transporting patients from the point of pickup to somewhere else, like to the hospital, were down.
Whoa.
Down. Ambulances, dispatches pronouncing the patient dead.
Yeah. Holy cow. So, I mean, arguably, people would choose not to go into a hospital in New York at that time. Trust me, I lived in New York.
Yeah, well, and they were told to stay home. They were told to stay home.
But that doesn't explain. Would that explain deaths at home? Would those be people who would have died anyway, but chose not to go to the hospital?
Yeah, and I think there's some of that. And I used to think that was almost entirely an explanation. I mean, you think about a guy even who lives in a rent-controlled apartment on the Upper East Side, and you tell him to stay home, and suddenly he's not going out. He's petrified, right? Like, could he have a health event? Yes, absolutely. But through our research, we found that ambulances and EMS were given orders that directed them away from bringing people to the hospital.
No.
Under two auspices. One, under the and we have the orders themselves. Two auspices were hospitals are overrun, and we don't want the hospitals to be overrun. We want to control spread. So the specific directive that was given about a cardiac arrest, patients in cardiac arrest, was basically, and I'm summarizing here, don't administer full life-saving measures. It was basically what EMS were told. And the orders that were given, if you graph
Ms. Hockett, don't administer them even in the person's home?
Right. So not don't administer at all. That's not quite what the orders say. But there's the directives are written in such a way where there's discouragement from administering full life-saving procedures to cardiac arrest patients. Almost a kind of DNR. Really.
In the home
in the home and at the point of pickup.
Jesus.
Correct.
So arguably, EMT workers are being instructed not to do everything possible to help save someone dying of very sick with heart attack in their home.
Okay, so make sure that you realize that we've had that, right? We're there. We are there with our little graph, right? Do not resuscitate orders are at the top of this graph because they are very important for the initial bomb going off in a lot of these places. And the act of making one of the bombs go off in one of these places around the United States and around the world is a combination of fear, confusion, and an illusion of consensus about a novel virus that's very deadly, detectable with a PCR test, and requiring of ridiculous protocols that are often deadly, or at least will be deadly because they make assumptions about respiratory disease that we've never made before, that include ventilators, lack of antibiotics, and poor use of steroids, and maybe even remdesivir. And so that difference, I guess that's going to be tricky. I need a button for that one. That difference is gigantic. And now that we're telling this story correctly, and now that we have Jessica to explain how did it happen in New York, because ladies and gentlemen, let's face it, if New York hadn't happened, people wouldn't have believed it. If Italy hadn't happened, people wouldn't have believed it. If whatever happened in Iran was not at least reported, people wouldn't have believed it. If those people, with those videos that went viral of people dropping onto the floor in all different places in China wouldn't have gone viral, there wouldn't have been this worst case scenario potential at the beginning. And it was so vital for there to be a worst case scenario potential at the beginning. And it was created by this bump right there in New York. And these bumps that are created by protocols, by treating people as though they had something else, a new cause of death, a novel virus.
Person dies, then is that classified as a COVID death? Like, how does this relate to COVID?
Well, yeah, we have that data to suggest that some people who died of cardiac arrest or heart deaths in their home, if they tested positive, or if the body tested positive, then it was counted as a COVID death. And if not, it wasn't. But the biggest increase in those weeks in home deaths is heart deaths.
Oh my gosh.
Heart deaths.
All right. So
this
is so scary. So now you've really got another smoking gun in my
Yeah, I think so too.
that needs explaining, and no wonder you're getting the runaround from fire department. Pardon me. People were given who ordinarily would have saved people's lives, who are having cardiac symptoms and or brought them to the hospital, were being told essentially not to do everything possible to save their lives and not to bring them to the hospital. Then these people died, and that's part of the 27,000 anomalous spike in deaths.
And by the way, it's worth pointing out that there are studies that show that during periods of high stress and war, so for example, post 9/11, there are some studies showing that there are definite spikes in acute cardiac episodes, myocardial infarctions. And that's just for a relatively short sort of period of fear and dystopia. This went on for weeks and was relentless. The stress on people was absolutely relentless.
Right.
And let's not miss the ball here and make sure that we understand that all of those heart attacks were immediately attributed to the virus. All of those cardiac problems were immediately attributed to the virus. And may I point out that people like Paul Offit and people like Peter McCullough will both tell you that the virus, the Wuhan spike, causes myocarditis and has caused heart attacks. They will most certainly tell you that, and we still need to dispel this enchantment that somehow there was a virus that did this, because what Jessica Hockett has uncovered here is also this absolute enchantment that these young people and old people were having heart attacks due to this virus. And why is that so diabolical, ladies and gentlemen? It's diabolical because they knew that when they rolled out this transfection, that heart problems would be one of the major signals. And so they had to seed a narrative about the virus already being able to cause that. How many of you in the audience have heard that Ralph Barrick was developing a coronavirus that could cause myocarditis in rabbits? How long have they been trying to get these lipid nanoparticles to go somewhere and been failing at it? 5 postdocs? Is that what Peter Cullis said? What is that, 10 years, 20 years, 15 years? He says we're still 20 to 40 years out. So you don't think that they figured out some of the major problems of lipid nanoparticle transfection were? You don't think that they tried to already maybe make up some other stories about where myocarditis might come from? Oh, coronaviruses can cause myocarditis. Look at that. Ooh, isn't that interesting? You got to see it for what it is, ladies and gentlemen, and let it be like acid. And let it dissolve everything that it can dissolve. These lies, once they go away, it's like cotton candy in the rain. There's nothing left but a pink stain. And once you see it for what it is, this theater was intricate, ladies and gentlemen. It was not random. They knew what they were doing. And they knew that they were going to plan to do a do not resuscitate drill. And when they did that do not resuscitate drill and they financially incentivized these people to call that COVID, you're dang right they reported it on the news. And why did they report it on the news? Because they wanted to tell you a story for a year and a half about how toxic the spike protein was. Holy cow, it's a spike protein. It's dangerous. It's got all kinds of new things in it. And it binds the ACE2 receptor. Boy, we sure chose a dumb protein in 45 minutes, didn't we there, Moderna scientists? Boy, if we'd have chose the N protein, everything would be fine now, wouldn't it? Don't you see? We got to spike this football. We got to make this touchdown. We cannot just have fourth down and goal and not make it. So we've got to go all the way through. You cannot get to the point where you say that we just didn't resuscitate people for heart attacks for a month, and that contributed to the 27,000 people that died over 11 weeks and the 20,000 people that died in 4 weeks. Without mentioning that allowed them to tell a nationwide and global story about how a virus from Wuhan was spreading in New York City and causing an abrupt rise in cardiac arrests.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, that's a huge chunk, a huge question that needs to be
And
answered.
one more piece to that I did not know and discovered only within the past 6 weeks or so. There were, I'll call them reimbursements that the federal government gave to ambulances for not coming to the hospital. So normally an ambulance company would get certain reimbursements or payments when you transport a patient to the hospital, right? But these ambulances were being directed or encouraged to not bring people to the hospital, but they were still reimbursed as though they did.
Right, so that incentivizes them not really to make.
That's a pretty magnificent financial incentive now, isn't it? And who are they giving those financial incentives to? Are people that ride around in ambulances really well paid? And so are they pretty easy to order around or to incentivize during a perceived healthcare crisis? And so look at how easy this circus was run. Look at how easy this was accomplished. But they had the cruise ship and they had tents set up. But then they didn't bring anybody in. It's just so wicked. It's just so absolutely wicked. It can't even believe it. And we are 3 years out, and we're just finally pulling our head out. Holy man.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
As I say, if you subsidize something, you get more of it.
Right, of course. So hospitals, I mean, an interesting question is, were hospitals making more visits than usual because they would have had the chance to go here, this person's dead, go here, this person's dead, go here, rather than spending 2 or 3 hours getting someone to the hospital and going back out?
Can you say that again?
It's another question. It's just, I'm wondering if I'm wondering if EMT visits in a given day went up because they did not have to bring the patient to the hospital in order to make the same amount of money.
You mean the dispatches?
The dispatches, yeah. In other words, you can see 15 people in their homes in a day. If you're not bringing them to the hospital, maybe 7 in a day if you're going back and forth to the hospital.
Sure. I mean, and from the hospital end, like we know that the ER visits were down. Well,
Right.
Ambulance dispatches transporting patients will give you a certain percentage. I think in New York, we figured out it was like at least 25%. If you just do the ratios, would be people brought by an ambulance.
Wow,
So,
yeah, you understand.
And I have no doubt that people were staying away from the hospital. But again, when you look at the 911 call data, it goes way up. So
Gotcha.
people were calling for help. Help was coming, but help was not helping. That's
And help was incentivized not to help. That's really
Exactly.
scary and disturbing.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Do you have anything else that suggests that this anomalous spike has something fishy about it?
I think one thing, and this is feedback that Jonathan and I get a lot. I think one thing that sort of wakes people up when they finally realize it, when I'm showing them different things on Twitter or wherever, is the number of young adult deaths during this time. Very quickly, and the number of young adult, or younger, I should say, adults, about 50 ages, 25 to 54, the number of younger adult deaths in hospitals, nearly all of which were attributed to COVID, which doesn't make sense because this is not even a generous definition or thought about how deadly COVID was or wasn't in this time period. You would not have seen a very high proportion of young deaths. And in fact, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say a quick stat on that,
Yeah.
which I find extraordinary, is that 25% of all the COVID attributed deaths in the USA occurred in New York City, when in fact only 3% of the people in that age group, we're talking about 25 to 55-year-olds, something 25 to 45, I think. 25% happened in New York City, but only 3% of that age group of Americans live in New York. So something is either false in the data, or there is some big problem with.
That's a very spectacular stat that can't be repeated enough. 25% of the age group between 25 and 45 that attributed to dying of COVID. 25% of them in the United States were in New York City. I mean, that's it. That's the ball game right there. And if you think about who was in charge in New York City these past years, I mean, if you think about the kinds of rhetoric and the kinds of things that were going on, the things that they did to their EMTs and the things I mean, their police officers, this is some serious, serious stuff. What I find a little odd and disturbing is that somebody from Chicago is the one who's figuring it out in 2023 and not somebody in New York in 2020 and 21. That's what I find very impressive. New York is not a small bureaucracy. New York is not a small town. New York is not a place where people don't know about corruption. So I am actually pretty shocked that we are in 2023 and someone from Chicago is the one who's pushing this story forward. Isn't there a whistleblower? Aren't there 1,000 whistleblowers in New York City who want to fight for where they grew up? What the hell's going on in New York City? Where's the old school Italians? Where are the old school, I'm trying to think of people that I stereotypically think of as living in New York City for generations. Is there a Chinatown in New York City? I don't know. Is there a Koreatown in New York City? I don't know. Is there a population in New York City that's been there a long time that would fight for the city and fight for truth and justice? Isn't there a whistleblower that lives there that could just fix this problem? Or is it really exactly as bad as that repair guy, Louis Rossman, says it is in New York City? Holy man, it's depressing to me. It's 2023. There should be hundreds of whistleblowers by now coming out and saying, wow, where are the EMTs? Dang it.
Treatment.
Okay, so you're saying a disproportionate number of younger adults died in New York than you'd expect to see, given that only 3% of the U.S. population of that age group lives in New York.
Correct.
Okay, so what's your theory there? Or what evidence do you have supporting? Is it just an anomaly in the data?
It's an anomaly, which is just yet another data point which we're putting the authorities to proof.
Okay,
How does that? I mean, it can't be explained by. It can't really be explained by social factors because New York is not a poor city. It can't be explained by obesity. New York is not particularly obese compared to some other places. There's no rational explanation for it.
Was it claimed that these were COVID deaths? Like how it was?
Wow. Yep.
Well, I know that the media was desperate to produce young, healthy.
Yeah, they were.
COVID. So let's go now. Unless there's anything else you want to make sure to bring forward, we're running low on time in the last couple of minutes. Let's highlight how you're putting the authorities on notice, because given HIPAA protections, it's going to be hard to drag them into the light of day to account for these anomalies. What are your plans or what's underway?
I think the first thing that we're trying to do is to continue. I have a lot of data. I have a lot of correspondence with different New York City agencies that I'm trying to put out a little bit at a time. I'm fighting New York Health and Hospital on data that they refuse to release, but should. So, I'm sort of simultaneously keep investigating and trying to get exposure through the channels that I can. It can be difficult when, even fellow anti-mandate people don't seem to want to talk about New York City 2020 or early 2020 at all and say, what the heck happened? You brought up remdesivir and ventilators, and I don't dispute that, but we don't even have data on how many New York City hospital patients were given remdesivir. I've done several articles on the ventilators. I'm sorry to say we don't have the data that we need to say even how many people were put on ventilators.
I guess I thoroughly understand and empathize with the hurdles facing you, and I admire your persistence. I'm asking, a practical question, right? Given HIPAA law, which they're going to say keeps them from telling you exactly who died, and the mechanism of FOIA, which I'm not sure you're using, right? What mechanism are you, like, apart from badgering people and trying to get exposure for this anomaly, which I applaud, and that'll move the dial a little bit, but you really need more data, right? They're keeping.
Well, we need more data, and we need more people who care about this. This shouldn't be just a Jessica Hockett, Jonathan Engler thing. This should enrage, really. And
what's the
New Yorkers? Well, we're on your show. I mean, I'll go on and talk to anybody. I'll debate anyone. I'll talk to anybody. I'll put up graphs to anyone. I'm not a media strategist. You tell me. I really don't know how to get people to care about this. If there's a mass casualty, the biggest mass casualty event in New York City history, and we don't have proof of it.
That's unfortunate, but
I really like what she said there, and I really feel as though that's the reaction of someone who's genuinely seen the alien and is annoyed by it. That's the only genuine reaction to this. You've got to be annoyed by it. If you're excited by it, if you're proud of your theory, if you're excited by what you're doing because this is such an interesting time to be alive, then you're not really seeing the alien. You haven't really touched the elephant from enough sides to know how dangerous this is, how little room in the room is left. And if you're not, a little bit like annoyed when somebody like Naomi Wolf, who's been apparently out in front of this from the very beginning with Steve Bannon, asks you what your plan is, how do you move this ball forward? And you have to exasperatedly say, well, I'm on your show. I'm trying to do something about it. You tell me. The frustrating thing about it is I'm not confident that Naomi Wolf is working on our team. If I had to put Naomi Wolf on the graph, I would put Naomi Wolf on the pink outside where she's part of this narrative. She tried pretty hard. What about in these high death areas where people were dying of all ages of COVID? What about these high death areas? So there was a complete insistence on reasserting that there was a novel virus for which we were all vulnerable, that millions of people died from and millions more were saved from and might have been gain of function. Naomi Wolf's not going to let that go. And so you could hear her fight for it. And now you hear a real, genuine, exasperated Jessica say, I don't know what to do. I'm not a press strategist. Tell me what to do. I just want people to understand this so that they are moved to take action somehow. Where is a New Yorker, she said.
I think all the questions you're asking are legitimate. For what it's worth, in the bodies of others, I found that the New York Times was able falsely to claim that there were so many dead people that we needed refrigerated morgue trucks by not reporting the fact that there had been a stoppage from the governor on burials, right? So I'm entirely willing. I think these are very important questions. I want to see you succeed in getting answers because they affect all of us. They were critical to the whole narrative. And, again, I'm a New Yorker. This was a very painful, awful time. And if people were doing bad things like not resuscitating people having heart attacks in their homes, that is, really, really, really important. I guess what I'm saying is we can certainly, spread the word. You're missing.
What word are you going to spread, Naomi? What is the word you're going to spread? That there was an anomaly? Or are you going to spread the word that Denny Rancor and Jessica Hockett and Jonathan Engler and Martin Neal and Nick Hudson and Jonathan Couey and a lot of other people have built a mountain of corroborating evidence which suggests that there is no biology and there is no statistics and there are no data to support the idea of an RNA coronavirus pandemic that started from a point and spread around the world. See, part of what we didn't say in this discussion about what this theory is that the biology doesn't support releasing a small quantity of an RNA virus in a point in Wuhan and having that virus spread by any means, airplanes, I don't care what. It's not possible for that RNA to copy itself with such high fidelity that the same sequence can be found in multiple culturable patients on multiple continents over multiple months after the original release in a market. It's just not possible. And so what these individuals have found are individual events and data sets which seem to support the larger thesis that there was no spread. And if there's no spread, then we need to come up with an alternative explanation for the purported molecular signals upon which the conclusion of a pandemic in progress was based. And so what are we going to do? Well, hopefully Naomi Wolf would start telling everybody this all the time on every one of her talk shows. Every one of her interviews would start out with, well, did you hear? The theory of how the pandemic has been updated. The biology of the pandemic has been updated. The epidemiology of the pandemic has been updated. I'm extremely curious as to why Jessica Hockett and Jonathan Engler aren't going to say, and they might say it still, that we have another independent researcher by the name of Denny Rancor and his colleagues in Canada and at Harvard, which have tried to assemble their own data sets on all-cause mortality and do their own analysis and have come to very similar conclusions about the lack of evidence for spread. And in fact, in their data, they are able to show that this lack of spread actually respects borders of states, countries, even counties. And so what are you going to do? You're going to add all these observations up. You're not going to say that I came up with this idea on my own and I looked at Italy. That's not getting the idea out there. Getting the idea out there is that me and a lot of other people have come up with individual examples of how all-cause mortality doesn't support the spread of a new cause of death. And this other friend of mine has come up with a whole bunch of evolutionary reasons and simulations for how a new cause of death that was released at a point would spread in a certain manner, and we didn't see that certain manner, not even close. And then I have this other friend who has this other idea about it in New York City, and she hasn't found anything either. And then we have this other guy who presented at Panda who's from Canada who found the same thing in 18 countries now. And there's this really interesting theory from this biologist named Jonathan Couey who thinks about RNA as being very imprecise and unable to high fidelity copy itself for millions and trillions of times. And that he's identified this alternative technique that they've used that's actually eerily parallel to the way that the mRNA vaccines were made, but instead that they can make whole coronavirus genomes in this way and make a pure quantity of them that could never exist in nature. It's a really intriguing explanation for how this sequence could have been seeded around the world and the illusion of a pandemic could have been created. See how easy I can summarize everybody's ideas all at once into like a 5-minute elevator pitch? And do you see how wonderfully, perfectly timed it is for the release of this book and the biology that's in it? We are about to hit a series of grand slams, ladies and gentlemen, and you are a part of it because you've been here with GigaOhm Biological for quite a long time. You've watched us struggle in this cave. You've watched us backtrack. You've watched us. Yeah, you watched. You've been here for it. A lot of you have supported me. I wouldn't be here without those people, without you people sharing my work. And these people are fighting the right fight, Jessica and Jonathan anyway. And we've got to sharpen our swords. We've got to sharpen our messages. We've got to broaden our message, and we've got to not be afraid to promote other people. We've got to promote each other. Like Jessica promotes me. Like Nick Hudson promotes me. We've got to promote each other. The people that we trust. And otherwise, we're not going to win. I'm going to listen to the last little bit, and then I'm going to close it out.
Some critical piece of information that the authorities are not going to give you, right, voluntarily.
Yeah.
So I think Panda needs to sue for the rest of the information, right? We can certainly put you in touch with lawyers who will do that if you don't have your lawyers in-house. But apart from that, I can't really think of what else you can do except exhaust yourselves, asking these people who may have committed a giant fraud to produce more information. Am I missing something?
No, you're not missing something. I wish more people cared about what happened in 2020 since it was used to coerce, forced medical treatments on, millions of people. What the heck happened?
I totally agree with you. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to
What I'm trying to say is that I'm not going to amplify this idea, and I am personally, my comfort and fame is all dependent on me not acknowledging that the faith in a novel virus that killed millions of people and likely was gain of function, it could come again. I'm not allowed to question that. So I'm just wondering how you guys are going to manage to get this message out if people like me are going to hear it, but then never actually repeat it. So if you go on other people's podcasts and they do the same thing as me, it's actually not going to do you any good. So I just don't want you guys to go crazy banging your head against the wall. I mean, you have to realize that most people aren't allowed to question the faith. That's what she should be saying to Jessica. That's what she is saying to Jessica.
and to share with love, as someone who's who's been in the trenches a long, exhausting time, as you have, no doubt, as Panda has, is everyone listening, especially New Yorkers, cares about what you just said. But there are missing pieces before it can be news, right? Before it can enter the formal news stream, and before there can be hearings, for instance, or lawsuits, right? And so to get those missing pieces, right, we need to find out if you're asking a provocative question, did 27,000 people really die in COVID? And the answer is yes.
No, I'm asking if 27,000 extra people actually died.
Right. Okay.
Did you hear her? Did you hear how brilliantly she resurrected the faith in COVID and the people that died? What question is Jessica asking according to Naomi Wolf? Did 27,000 people die of COVID? And that is not the question that Jessica's asking. Listen.
Pieces before it can be news, right? Before it can enter the formal news stream, and before there can be hearings, for instance, or lawsuits, right? And so to get those missing pieces, right, we need to find out if you're asking a provocative question, did 27,000 people really die in COVID? And the answer is yes.
No, I'm asking.
And the answer is yes. Or did you listen to anything that Jonathan and Jessica said? Darn it. Did you listen to anything? That's incredible. That is really incredible. This is almost guaranteed to be, this is faith protection here. This is definitely narrative protection.
If 27,000 extra people actually died.
Right. Okay. Totally provocative question. From what I understand, you've battled your way to the end of that question, right? You're expecting more FOIA results, but I don't know that you have answered it with yes, for sure it's fraud, or yes, for sure they died, or yes, it was fraud.
Wow. So she doesn't understand. 27,000 bodies don't disappear. I don't even get it. Like, it's so easy. You could just send a bunch of high schoolers out into all the graveyards. I mean, what are we talking about here? And as we wrote in our notes, what about the funeral homes? What about the coroners? What about cremations? What about the thousands of holes? Where are the graves? Where are the bodies? And in the weeks where there were up to 5,000 people recorded dying in a week, where were those bodies stored? I mean, has anyone ever seen Band of Brothers when they were in Belgium and there were like bodies stacked outside of the hospital? That was only like 15. And there were only maybe 100 guys in that hospital underneath the church that got blown up. Like, thousands of bodies we're talking about. 5,000 bodies. I mean, there would have been some photographs of this, right? I mean, oh yeah, we saw one body go into a white truck one time on CBS NewsHour. We're talking about thousands of bodies. And Naomi Wolf is still not on to the idea that, okay, so you really haven't confirmed whether these people have died or haven't died. And so it's kind of a problem. You're kind of at an impasse. And where Jessica is that if it's 27,000 people, that is a mass casualty event that can't be just, where'd they go? I don't, they were just here a minute ago. I don't know where, somebody must have moved them. That's not how that works. And yet here's Naomi Wolf saying that, well, you're asking a provocative question, but it looks like you're kind of at an impasse. And it doesn't look like you're going to be able to get any more data. No, that's not at all Jessica's position. Jessica's position is that you claim that there was a battleship that landed in the middle of Central Park. But for some reason or another, I don't see any sign of this. And not just, that ditch isn't the right shape, or those, there's not enough. There is missing. And so it's very interesting how Naomi wants to close it with, again, making it seem as though, it's a neat idea. Pretty interesting question. Everybody in New York cares about this question, Jessica, but I don't know if you've done enough work to convince people it's news. I don't know if it's newsworthy yet, she said.
And murder, we don't have those answers yet, right? So that's where the next step, in my view, needs to come in, which is, legal, right? So that so people are forced to hand over those records. At least that's what I'm hearing. I mean, I'm not sure. I can promote this, and everyone will say, "What an interesting question! How alarming!" But I, as a someone who cares about this issue and wants to get to the heart of it, as a reporter, I'm at a standstill because I can't now go to the rest of the world and say, "I know what happened. There was malfeasance here. I know there was fraud." What we've got are some very big, important questions, right?
If I can...
So she can't go and tell everybody this because she doesn't have the proof yet. And that's really all on Jessica and on Jonathan. And they really need to do more legwork before people like Naomi Wolf are going to be able to put their journalistic integrity on the line and actually report these ideas. Come on now. I mean, I know that Giggle and Biological really slums when it comes to what things we report, but we don't even hold a candle to the kind of integrity that Naomi Wolf holds her reporting to.
Summarize what you're basically saying, I think, is that we're in a position where we've thrown the story out there and we're expecting the baton to be picked up by people who are enraged and who then apply political pressure to political people to pass executive orders or whatever, so that this is thoroughly investigated. And I think what you're saying is that's not going to happen. You have to go more onto the front foot.
That's what I'm saying.
Basically, in terms of, and just to, Panda is not a big organization with huge resources, so we would struggle to sort of prosecute a legal case, but we possibly could do so with the assistance of, some public funding for it. From
right. All right, well, let's end.
Yeah, so let's fund an organization in South Africa to do a legal case in America. That sounds like a great idea, especially if the people that we're funding are actually based all around the world. That's a great idea. That sounds wonderful. I think I've got a better idea. I think we should find an American organization to do it. And I think I'm going to write some emails and figure that out if this isn't worth working on. I do think that Jessica is worth working with. And I do think the state of New York and the city of New York are worth fighting for. And fighting against in this case. So yeah, we'll see where this goes, but I'm not really impressed with Naomi Wolf. And if Jonathan Engler is still watching, I apologize for being a little bit sharp on you in the beginning. I think you've done pretty well and have been very humble in the interview since the introduction. So I apologize for coming hard on Jonathan, but I am going to stick by with what I said. I think he did a little bit of a disservice to Panda by making it seem like it was him and one other guy in Panda who came up with these ideas, when really what it was is that Panda was actually a very, very good place for these discussions to occur. And it was one of the best and most regular places for these discussions to occur. It was as significant for a lot of people as the Doctors for COVID Ethics in Europe, and as significant as for some people as the doctors group that Stephen Frost chairs, the Medical Doctors for COVID Ethics. It's as big as, the heart group for some people. It is, these kinds of groups were important in different places around the world. In the United States, it might be the Brownstone Organization. You might think of it as the FLCCC if you're a fan of Dr. Merrick. But whatever group you're looking at as a group of organized good guys, I would say there isn't one of these groups that isn't infiltrated. It's impossible. Given what I've learned from all the groups that I've been a member of, all of these groups have had problems with what they perceive as infiltration, what they perceive as meddling, what they perceive as people with ulterior motives. And so, honestly, I think it's really important to cite the fact that despite all of these meddlers, that there were groups like the Doctors for COVID Ethics that's headed by Michael Palmer and Sukrit Bhakti, the medical doctors for COVID Ethics, the one that is headed by Stephen Frost and Charles in Australia, who I can't remember, with the red jacket, who I love very much. As the host of those meetings and moderator of those meetings. and countless other groups that are smaller than that have been meeting on Zoom are all groups of people that need to be united by common hat tips. I got no problem saying that Panda was a great group and that they are a great group, and I liked a lot of the people in Panda and that I learned so much. I would be willing to bet that the evolutionary biologist that he's not naming here, I'm sure I know which one he's talking about. And if he's not talking about that guy, he's talking about one of two other people. Because there were a couple really strong elder evolutionary biologists and elder, I don't know what the other guy was, but they're all older than me and had been in academia their whole lives. And these guys knew that this was baloney, and they knew it from their bones. And so the doubt was there from the very beginning. And then what you need is to collectively support one another as we explore this and as we, go through the waves of, am I crazy or not? Am I crazy or not? And the more people that you have around you that you feel safe with saying, dude, am I crazy? Is this right? Am I reading this paper right or not? Then the stronger you become as an analyst and the stronger you become as a critical thinker. And so I think it's just imperative, and that's why I do it all the time, to say that none of these ideas are mine, and that so much of how I got to where I am in my understanding and my ability to present my best understanding of how they've done the pandemic is because of the heated discussions and opportunities to present to groups like Panda and Doctors for COVID Ethics and Medical Doctors for COVID Ethics and the groups at CHD and the groups that I've even presented to a couple groups that are essentially just Christian groups, and to the NCI, National Citizens Inquiry in Canada. All of these discussions, all of these were important to all of us not feeling crazy so that we could continue to critically think and analyze this situation and get to where we are right now. And the only way that we're going to get there is continue with this scrum formation where we're all locked arms and we're all pushing forward. Nobody's allowed to stand up at this point and say, this was my idea. We've got to all fight together now. And it's a different kind of call for unity that we were making a year ago when people like Robert Malone were saying that I don't think we should divide the dissidents at all. Everybody's got to agree. And I was called a divider for a year already. And all these streams are doing is dividing people. All these streams were doing was separating the people who would not shake from the faith, separating those people from the people who were questioning the faith, and separating from the people who were insistent on the faith, certain about the faith. This is where the danger was, and this is what the power of this message is, and this is the danger of Naomi's resistance to it. Naomi should be in a position, seeing as she said she was on the edge of this for so long, she should be more open to this being nonsense than almost anyone else, because she should be more aware of all of the lies that have been used to exacerbate it. And the more lies you become aware of, the more you realize that the exacerbation was the majority, the exaggeration was the majority, was the only thing that was necessary.
And I hope you understand when I was pushing you, it's just like to drag this corpse into the light of day so people can see exactly what you've got. They've done heroic work in raising really important questions and finding what I think are several smoking guns, right, that require investigation. Certainly the directives to EMTs, that's like terrifying. I mean, I say this as someone who nearly died in a New York State hospital recently. We don't know if those directives have been rescinded, right? We don't know if it's safe to put your loved one in a New York State hospital at all, right? This is the state that wants quarantine camps. They still want quarantine camps. Right. So I think what you've done to date is incredibly important. I would like to think that people, especially New Yorkers listening, will hear you and go, this is madness. We need to oblige these agencies to turn over what they're withholding. As you know, I don't think that will happen, even because, Mayor Adams, who's himself under investigation, doesn't have the power probably to compel some of these agencies, certainly not at the federal level, but even different fiefdoms in New York State have their own lawyers, right, and can resist even Mayor Adams' call. I mean, I don't know all the mechanisms of municipal secrecy in New York City, but it's a very not transparent city in a not transparent state run by, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is the agencies who have the data you're asking for were directed by the chief murderers or fraudsters, right? Whether it's Andrew Cuomo or now Governor Hochul, and so they have an incentive to not turn it over and to wait out the furor. So now I'll stop there. I don't mean to be a downer, but I think that this absolutely requires more investigation, and I would say a lawsuit is critical, so that you can have discovery. And so I would say if people want to send you money to fund a lawsuit, should they send it to Panda? Does Panda want to think about it? Do you want to come back to me later and tell me what?
I'll come back to you.
Right.
Back to you later on that. Yeah, we should designate fund for that, I think. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I'm so happy he said that.
Right. So let's stop there. You've shaken me to the core. I think this is definitely an important thing to investigate further. I want to thank you both for the tireless work you've done to this point. We're proud to bring your work to the forefront. We also are going to bring this to our data scientists who may have some ideas about how to mine the data you have in order to see if there's any more that can be surfaced if you want us to. And we love Panda. We love your leadership on this issue. Where can people find you otherwise? And then we should probably sign off.
So they can find me. I write for both Panda Substack and Heart Substack, and also Where Are the Numbers, which is Professor Norman Fenton and Martin Neal's Substack. On Twitter, they can find me at my Twitter handle is.
So just to address the chat a little bit, I understand that we have a photograph of Naomi posing with Jill with martinis, and that's on Twitter. But I mean, that doesn't really show you very much, because here's me at the original CHD conference, happily taking a photo with Jill. Now, you might think in your head there's a very different reason why I'm happy to take a photo with her. And if you think that, yes, you would be correct. There's a very different reason why I was happy to take a photo with her. But I'm just saying that in and of itself is not evidence that they're in cahoots or something like that. Now, they were dressed a little different and they were holding different drinks. And the context of that photo is obviously very different. But I just wanted to throw that out there. But I agree. I think Naomi Wolf's responses in this interview to the data and ideas that these two guys brought to her, I actually are the biggest reveal for me. I'm a little disappointed that I let my ego get in the way in the beginning of this video, but whatever. It is what it is. I am frustrated because I do think that there is a lack of humility when it comes to where these ideas and the way that they are building on one another, the way that these things came together. And I wish people would give more credit to the energy and the collective that did this. I mean, how much we benefit from knowing that we're not crazy because other people say, wow, thanks for that presentation, thanks for that idea, that clarified something for me that didn't make sense, that straightened out an incongruency for me. I mean, it was so important so many times to hear discussion, and so I just think that that's the most important thing to accentuate here, that this was such a collective effort. To
J. Engler UK, one word.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Engler. And how about you, Ms. Hockett?
I'm at woodhouse76.com and at wood_house76. My former Twitter name was Emma Woodhouse, which, back in the day, people might remember me when I was under that eponym fighting crazy mandates. So, delighted to be on your program. Thank you so much for having us.
That is really one of the amazing things, about Jessica, is that her Emma Woodhouse account was way on my radar, like way, way, way on my radar in 2020. And a lot of people probably remember it as like this girl with an arrow. I don't know if that's from the Hunger Games or what that was from, but it was a really, really important account. Anonymous, but it was an account that was saying the right things very, very early. And so it was really a delight for me to finally figure out that Jessica Hockett was really that account, and to find that, I had been following her and she had been following me for that long. Yeah, it's a really special day right here now, I think, because of the fact that this book finally came out and that we're actually going to be able to tell this story. Now, keep in mind what I said in the beginning of the show and what I will continue to say. Codified in this book is the Scooby-Doo. The details of the Scooby-Doo are in this book. The history of the Scooby-Doo, because the history of the Scooby-Doo is much longer than 2020. The Brett Weinstein and intellectual dark web, yes, they played a crucial role in setting the worst case scenario and to curate the narrative as it was slowly unrolled as a little argument or a little mystery to being solved. And this book actually is a historic document which really documents what people said when they said it, and it goes back in time to kind of document the history of bioweapons, how many of them were real, who's doing them, what really happened. And I think this and the Tony Fauci book really put together an interesting set of citations. And in this case, the Wuhan book has also got some very interesting insight into what I think is the real biology that underpins coronavirus pandemics. And I think we're going to be able to teach it. We're going to be able to open that book, and we're going to be able to read passages, and then we're going to be able to look at detailed discussions about this biology with examples from the primary literature, and make it so that a large portion of the interested population will have access to this truth. The truth of infectious clones, the truth of how RNA can and can't replicate, the truth of where these excess deaths actually came from, the truth of how PCR can and can't be used with high fidelity. There are just a nice list of biological truths that we are going to get out as a result of this book coming out, and as a result of us being constantly there for 3 years with steady pressure about natural immunity, steady pressure about the biology of coronavirus, the biology of RNA, the biology of DNA, the biology of the swarm, and the lies that these people told.
Having us.
Thank you both. And if there's a wealthy patron or two out there listening who wants to get to the heart of whether 27 extra people died in New York in spring, 27,000 people extra died in the spring of 2020, thus allowing the whole narrative to unfold, please contact them or us. And if they contact us, we'll send them to help you with this critical, in my view, important lawsuit and further investigation. And let's also throw it out to all the independent media to look into it further as well. Thank you so much for all you're doing. Take care. Hey, everyone. It's Naomi Wolf of Daily Clout.
There is no lawsuit. They don't have a lawyer. This is a Substack, and that's all it is. So it's very strange that we're still talking like there's a lawsuit. There's no lawsuit. And if there's some wealthy donor, that wealthy donor is going to call Naomi Wolf, hey, I want to give $1 million to that Jessica Hockett lady. Can you give me her address? Do you see the dysfunction here? Do you see what's going wrong with this? Maybe we should call Steve Kirsch. Maybe he's got $10 million to bet on this. I mean, Steve Kirsch has $10 million to bet on an argument with people to do a social media stunt. Doesn't he have like $100,000 to hire a law firm for a couple weeks? Or this is where the gigantic pile of disingenuousness just becomes really obvious. Once you start to see all these people talking, and they don't do anything. It's really an easy explanation, Naomi. If Jessica Hockett's observations in New York are correct, if Jonathan Engler's and the other guys' information and observations in Italy are correct, then the WHO declared a pandemic of a dangerous novel virus that was detectable by a nonspecific PCR test. And it was through misinformation and pressure, including financial pressure, that caused a change in protocols around the world in key locations that caused a simultaneous increase in excess deaths that was attributed to a new cause of death, the novel coronavirus. In reality, the probably best way that this kind of molecular signal could be seeded is through the use of an RNA infectious clone that would have been produced using a DNA clone template of the RNA virus that they wanted to spread. Whether or not a clone release would have successfully caused short-term spread of an RNA signal, I don't know. And I don't think it really matters because they did not successfully culture and sequence from that many people at the start of the pandemic, so they didn't really need it. to go that far. If there was a background signal that was conflatable as a novel coronavirus spread, then most certainly they used the PCR test to use that to their advantage. And irrespective of the actual biology that is unfolded and how much of it is real and how much of it is exclusively commitment to lies doesn't really matter, because the goal remains the same, and that is a total surrender of individual sovereignty of our children and the enforcement of a global inversion from basic human rights to basic granted permissions. And they have done this because they have successfully created this illusion of consensus that includes a mystery that we have all solved, and therefore brainwashed ourselves into accepting a faith in a novel virus that killed millions of people, from which millions more were saved, the source of which was likely gain-of-function research, which is definitely real because Kevin Esfeld tells us that, and Richard Ebright has told us that. And Rand Paul insists that the diffuse proposal is evidence of that, and therefore a virus will come again. And they've done this by not doing the math, which is what Jessica and Jonathan Engler and others, John Bodwin and Housatonic Live, Mark Kulak, all these people are fighting for a real story about what happened and how the real story of these people were killed. And the only way you're going to know what the mystery virus did was to subtract all these things from the total. And when you do that, there's nothing left for the mystery virus. But Naomi Wolf does not want to actually do this math. She wants them to get more data first because it's not really a news story yet. And in this wonderful news story, did we ever talk in this hour with them about did Naomi ever mention that, wait, but we know that the PCR was fraud? Did she mention that? Oh, yeah, and I heard that, that there was this huge lateral flow test fraud that was responsible for the next 2 waves in the UK, and all of these tests just came from China, and everybody started using them. Did they talk about that? Did they talk about the idea that, the only way to study an RNA virus, that even Ralph Barrick wrote in a 2008 paper, that unfortunately most of these viruses that are found in the wild are unable to be cultured? Did they talk about that? They talk about natural immunity to RNA viruses and how T-cell immunity to previous exposures would have never had a problem, even if all of their biology is correct. And now I understand that this is all about their little finding, and that their one thing they're pushing right now is Jessica's observation about how hard it is to confirm that these 27,000 people died and that this 20,000 people died in 4 weeks. But what I'm very frustrated by is that we should always be trying to at least summarize the whole story so that we understand why their particular observations are so important in the context of all these other observations. It's definitely scary, terrifying that they told people not to resuscitate people, that they actually instructed and paid ambulance drivers not to bring people to the hospital, but paid them as if they did. That's a pretty amazing encouragement. So doesn't that become an even more extraordinary set of circumstances in light of the PCR fraud, in light of the lateral flow test fraud, in light of the fraud around natural immunity and antibodies, in light of the fact that they said that the coronavirus was causing cardiac arrests, and now we heard a very good explanation for why it might not have been, but we just don't quite, and we're not able to get that over the finish line. We're not able to connect those dots. We just are stuck on one dot all the time, or maybe connecting one dot to another dot. The reality is that if you don't subtract the fact that the protocols were murder, then you can actually believe in a mystery virus. But if you subtract the fact that the protocols were murder, then the whole faith in a mystery virus evaporates. The whole faith evaporates. Once you realize that that this biology of releasing something in late 2019 and having it spread around the world is not, there's no biological basis for this. A small amount of RNA in a wet market, or a whole cage full of animals that are all infected with RNA are still a small amount of RNA relative to the amount of RNA we have to be at 2023, given the claims that they've made, the products that they've sold, the data that they've shown us. This faith is a lie, and it is sustained by a spectacular commitment to those lies in the form of an illusion of consensus. And I love to call it a Scooby-Doo because we've been fooled into thinking we solved it. And it was the act of being fooled like this that has allowed us to completely miss this protocols were murder thing. They fooled a lot of people around the world with this illusion, with this mystery-solving exercise. And it's the faith in the novel virus we have to get rid of, and we get rid of it by saying that the faith is a lie. And the only thing you need to understand is that if there was a background signal before 2020, we have no data to confirm that it wasn't there. None at all. We have no data to say that the earth was clean in 2019 and became dirty in Wuhan first, and then the dirt spread around the world, because that's what this kind of dirt does. We have no evidence for it. And the reason why they want you to attribute as many biological terms from regular ecology to the biology of viruses is because this will allow you to make the false equivalence between viruses and other living species, when you should be thinking them more of as dirt or noise or a stain. And no matter how nasty the stain is, no matter how sticky the pine tar is, there are certain limitations to how far it can spread by itself. And RNA does not have the magical ability that species do to spread and spread and spread. Even when it is made ultra pure by synthetic means, infectious RNA can't create infinite copies of itself so that we can produce it en masse, store it, share it. It can't. We can use artificial means to produce a large quantity of pure RNA, which is infectious and could be called a coronavirus clone. But using normal collection and culture methods, it's impossible for this to occur. That's the reality of this biology that is missing from the story. So when we find out that there's no spread, and that all these molecular biologists say, but there was a signal, we've got to be able to explain it. That's where the biology comes in. So we need to explain how in an endemic coronavirus background and a non-specific PCR test targeting highly homologous gene sequences, short amplicons, could be misconstrued as a specific test for a specific part or aspect or member of this background signal. We have to be able to explain how the high-fidelity sequences could be found after culturing these viruses in these different places. And infectious clones allows us to explain those things. And then we can overlay on top of that, don't forget that the protocols were murder and transfection was never medicine, and they knew that. And now the picture becomes clear. And we can start to expand people's imagination by making them understand the difference between an infectious clone and a transfection agent of a particular toxic protein, and how either of those two explanations could, in theory, explain the illusion of the pandemic. The release of an infectious clone that was sufficient for brief culturing and sequencing with a good signal may have been brought over by the Snohomish County man. May have been the source of the pneumonia sequence derived for the Wuhan virus. May have even been found in Iran and in Italy. But if we understand the combination of this with protocols that were murder and the intention of rolling out transfection as medicine, always knowing that it would not work as intended, but the intention was to fool us into believing that it did, the conflated background signal takes on an added diabolical role, because they're inoculating us with something that they know will produce a signal that they can confound as immunity when you don't need immunity because you've already got it, because it was a background signal since you were a kid. And so the lies go all the way down to the floor when they tell you that the earth was clean in 2019 and then some dirt got loose in Wuhan and away it went. And that's exactly why this an example of a alternate theory was so diabolical as well. Because it was very difficult for you to question the narrative in the first 2 or even 3 years of the pandemic and not get sucked into a debate about whether there are viruses or not. Wait, have you read the measles papers from the early 50s? If you haven't, then you don't know what you're talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the way out. I am so sure that this is the way we save our children from these lies. I am so sure that this is the way that we save our children from growing up believing in a world in this faith. The biology is the way out, ladies and gentlemen. Pointing out what they don't talk about is the way out. And if we understand why they're doing this, because they want our children, and they want control, and they want control based on lies. And you can't do it to a globe with religions and with multiple languages and multiple cultures. You got to come up with a narrative that unites everyone. The only one that might work better than a virus might be aliens. But since they prepared us with cartoons and X-Files episodes and Planet of the Apes introductions and themes, remakes, about viruses spreading around the world for decades, it seems pretty likely that the mythology they're putting all their chips on is the public health one. And if climate change plays a role, the only real thing that climate change is going to do is release more viruses and cause more famine. Ladies and gentlemen, stop all transfections in humans. Please stop all transfections in humans. I really think it's important that we stop all transfections in humans, please. And that's because they're trying to eliminate the control group by any means necessary. This has been GigaOhm Biological, a high-resistance, low-noise information brief brought to you by a biologist. Intramuscular injection of any combination of substances with the intent of augmenting the immune system is dumb, and transfection in healthy animals is criminally negligent. I went too long tonight and didn't have quite the right energy in the beginning, but I ended all right, and I'm happy with it. And it's another stream. I'm going to see you again tomorrow because we're going to try and keep this streak going. I'm going to try and figure out how to do shorter than 2 hours, but so far, not going to happen. Thanks for joining me, guys. I really appreciate it. 80 people here is very nice. I seem to get above 80 every night, so that's really just flattering. So thanks very much for using your time to listen to me. I do have plans to start the PDFs again. But once the PDFs start, we're not going to be able to do dailies. So I got to kind of figure out how I'm going to do that. Whether I can produce a PDF every once in a while and still do dailies is questionable because of basketball and all this other stuff. But I also really like to have the momentum of every day doing a stream. It organizes my thoughts and it makes me feel better before I go to bed. So in the foreseeable future, my plan is to keep the dailies going, but also to try and up the game with regard to the slide decks in the coming weeks, because again, as I said, the book is coming out, and once the book is actually out and the public has it, we're going to start teaching it, and we're going to start teaching basic immunology again and the virology of clones and all of this stuff. So holy man, I can't wait. Thanks guys, see you soon.